In today's video, we are covering three major developments shaking the geopolitical landscape on March 16, 2026. First, Donald Trump makes a controversial statement comparing Ukraine to Lebanon and declaring that the United States is under no obligation to help Kyiv. Second, a new investigation reveals that North Korea supplied Russia with up to 11 million artillery shells over 2.5 years in a covert operation that sailors inadvertently exposed through social media posts. And third, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is reportedly urging Trump to keep striking Iran with force, reviving a decades-old Saudi strategic doctrine that has never been more relevant than it is today. Let's get into it. Donald Trump dropped a statement on March 16, 2026, that immediately sent shockwaves through allied capitals. Speaking during a lunch with members of the board of the Trump Kennedy Center, the President of the United States said plainly, "Ukraine is thousands of miles away from us, separated by an ocean. We are not obligated to help them." That sentence alone is enough to redefine the entire framework of Western support for Kyiv. But Trump did not stop there. He went further, comparing Ukraine to Lebanon, a country that has lived through decades of conflict and bombardment. "They got used to the bombings in Lebanon," Trump said. "There are people living there too, even if you might think there aren't." The implication was unmistakable, that Ukrainians, like the Lebanese, may simply need to adapt to their circumstances rather than expect indefinite American backing. Trump also took a direct shot at his predecessor, claiming that Joe Biden provided aid to Ukraine because he was deceived. This framing is important to understand. It is not simply a political attack on Biden. It is Trump constructing a narrative in which American involvement in the Ukraine war was never a matter of strategic necessity, but rather the result of manipulation and bad judgment. By casting the previous policy as a mistake born of deception, Trump creates political cover to walk away from commitments without appearing to abandon an ally. He is not retreating in this framing. He is correcting an error. And here is where the situation gets genuinely complicated. European officials are now openly alarmed. Some have already begun suggesting that the level of military assistance to Ukraine could be reconsidered under the current American administration. The debate inside Europe over building a sovereign defense industrial base has accelerated sharply. Finland's defense minister, Antti Häkkänen, stated this week that Europe needs its own production infrastructure for weapons systems so that Ukraine can receive air defense equipment faster and without depending on decisions made in Washington. That is a remarkable statement when you think about it. A NATO member is essentially acknowledging that the alliance's backbone may no longer be reliable enough to plan around. Meanwhile, the European Union has already depleted its own stocks of missiles for air defense systems while trying to keep Ukraine supplied against relentless Russian missile attacks. New deliveries depend on a global market that is now under serious pressure because of the ongoing operation in Iran. And Trump's preferred format for future aid, if any comes at all, appears to be loans rather than grants, a position he has held since criticizing Biden's approach. Loans mean repayment. Repayment means a country already fighting for its survival would be accumulating debt while its cities are being struck. The strategic and humanitarian implications of that shift are enormous. Now to the second major story of the day, and this one involves a level of operational detail that reads almost like a thriller, except that it is entirely real and documented. An investigation published by the Russian independent outlet Vazhnya Istory, working in collaboration with British analysts from the Open Source Center, has revealed the full scale of North Korea's ammunition supply to Russia over the course of the war. The numbers are staggering. Over 2.5 years, 4 Russian vessels made at least 112 voyages to North Korea and delivered between 8 and 11 million rounds of artillery ammunition to Russian armed forces. At peak capacity, Pyongyang was supplying Moscow with approximately 350,000 rounds per month, enough to sustain roughly one full month of Russian offensive operations with each delivery cycle. The deception involved in running this operation is worth examining closely. The Russian ships declared their destination as Busan, the major South Korean port, when departing. Russian border officials actually issued documents listing South Korea as the destination, but the sailors aboard those ships were not as careful as their handlers expected. Members of the crew posted more than 60 photos and videos from their trips to North Korea on social media. In one image, the screen of a navigation system clearly showed the ship's location inside North Korean territory. Satellite tracking of the actual routes confirmed the rest. The entire covert supply chain was essentially unmasked by the people running it, which tells you something about the gap between the strategic ambition of the operation and the discipline on the ground level. The shipments were initially supervised by Andrei Grinko, a veteran captain who had carried out classified missions for Russia's Ministry of Defense for years, including trips to Syria. He was also aboard the Ursa Major, a vessel that sank off the coast of Spain in late 2024 under circumstances that were never fully clarified publicly. European intelligence sources believed the Ursa Major was carrying components for a nuclear reactor intended for a North Korean submarine at the time of its sinking. The convergence of all these elements, covert ammunition transfers, nuclear components, intelligence operatives, false documentation, creates a picture of a shadow logistics network operating at a scale that Western sanctions were clearly not designed to stop. The supply did begin to slow. By autumn of 2024, the number of monthly voyages dropped from 5 to 3. Since the start of 2026, only a single delivery has been identified. Analysts point to two likely explanations. Russia has significantly expanded its own domestic ammunition production, reducing its dependence on external supply, and North Korea's own stockpiles appear to have been drawn down to levels that triggered a response. In December 2025, Kim Jong-un personally ordered the construction of new military facilities and a ramp-up in the production of missiles and munitions. The implication is that Pyongyang stretched itself thin to support Moscow and is now rebuilding capacity for its own future requirements. The third story comes from the Gulf, and it adds yet another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation around Iran. According to White House officials speaking to the New York Times on Sunday, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been privately advising Donald Trump to continue striking Iran with force. The exact reported guidance: keep hitting the Iranians hard. This echoes advice that the late Saudi King Abdullah reportedly gave to Washington repeatedly years ago, famously urging American officials to cut off the head of the snake, a reference to Iran's regional network of proxies and influence operations. On the same day this report emerged, Mohammed bin Salman and UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed held direct talks amid growing questions about whether the Gulf states will maintain their posture of avoiding open confrontation with Tehran. The two leaders issued a joint statement declaring that Iran's continued attacks against Gulf Cooperation Council member states represent a dangerous escalation that threatens the security and stability of the region. They also affirmed that GCC countries will continue defending their territories and deploying all available resources to maintain regional stability. That language is careful but pointed. The Gulf states are not yet making the leap to direct military engagement with Iran, but they are signaling alignment with the American campaign and framing Iranian behavior as a threat that justifies collective response. For Riyadh in particular, this is a significant public posture. Saudi Arabia spent years trying to manage its relationship with Tehran through back-channel diplomacy, including a normalization process brokered by China in 2023. That process appears to be effectively dead. The Saudi calculation now seems to be that a weakened Iran serves Saudi regional interests more than a negotiated coexistence ever could. What ties these three stories together on March 16, 2026, is a single underlying dynamic. The architecture of the post-Cold War security order is under simultaneous pressure from multiple directions at once. The United States under Trump is renegotiating the terms of its commitments to allies in Europe while deepening its operational involvement in the Middle East. Russia is sustaining a war of attrition in Ukraine with covert foreign supply chains that Western intelligence tracked but could not fully stop. And the Gulf monarchies are quietly cheering on American military pressure against the one regional power that has long served as the primary challenge to their dominance. The world is not moving toward a single new confrontation. It is fragmenting into overlapping crises, each one feeding the others. If this kind of in-depth, no-spin geopolitical analysis is what you come here for, make sure you are subscribed to this channel and have notifications turned on. Every day brings new developments that the mainstream news cycle covers only on the surface. We are here to go deeper. Now, let's keep going. The questions these three stories raise are not comfortable ones. Is Ukraine being quietly abandoned by its most powerful backer? Is North Korea now a permanent Tier 2 arms supplier in a new axis of authoritarian powers? And is the Gulf now effectively a partner in an American campaign against Iran that could reshape the entire regional order? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation worth having, and your perspective on where all of this is heading matters.